And when you internalize the feelings, that's when you hurt yourself. You know, if you're being the good kid, making mommy and daddy happy, and never talking about how you feel, you're in trouble. You know, whereas if your twin sister's bellowing and loving and doing what she wants and not worrying what her parents say, yeah, she's less likely to come down with an illness than you are keeping everything inside.
The Vidal Speaks podcast.
Episode 123, Dr. Bernie Siegel teaches us how love and joy are the most powerful medicines. Welcome to Vidal Speaks. My name is Deborah Vidal, former 11-year LPGA golf pro turned classical homeopath, certified plant-based nutritionist, and wellness coach. Each week here on Vidal Speaks, we bring you knowledge, inspiration, or natural remedies to help you take charge of your health and feel your best. I believe health is freedom and knowledge is power. So tuning in each week will give you the power to take steps towards freeing yourself from the chains that hold you back from having the energy to do all you want in life. No matter where you are in your journey of wellness, Vidal Speaks can help. I promise. Hey Vidal Speakers, welcome back. How are you guys today? I hope great. But if you're having a bit of a down day or you're struggling with finding joy in your life, then today's show is for you. And even if you have a lot of joy in your life, then today's show is for you too, because my guest is the most famous spiritual man and natural healer on the planet, Dr. Bernie Siegel. Bernie, as he likes to be called, will tell us about how being happy is directly related to our health. He's really an artist when it comes to communicating because he gives you so much wisdom through his hundreds and hundreds of stories that are all so interesting and full of real people and events that he has experienced in his life. Of all the podcast interviews that I've done, you guys, this may be my favorite because there's just something about Bernie that felt so familiar. You know that feeling when you meet somebody and you feel you've known them for many years already or that you met them before? Well, that's the feeling that I got as soon as we said hello. I felt deeply touched by his passion to help others, even though he had to undergo so much flack from his own industry and professionals. And back in the 70s, his ideas were really considered crazy, but he was convinced that he had to listen to his patient's story and understand why they got their disease in the first place. And as a homeopath, of course I know that every disease has a so-called story behind it. You'll always see a thread of grief or shock, anger, betrayal, or disappointed love amongst many other causes in all stories of sick patients. The world is becoming so stressed, and many people even start out life with challenges of being unhappy by having unhappy childhoods. But Bernie helps people realize their human potential, and it's not a surprise that he was voted top 20 most spiritual humans on the planet. Thankfully, his dedication over the years has allowed his message to get to millions. People need to learn that your level of joy and outlook on life has a direct link to your physical body. And sometimes we have to work really hard to find joy. Sometimes we have to make really serious life changes to get ourselves out of situations that are making us sick. But the most important is to learn that we all have God-given rights to be happy. And with Bernie, we also all have a coach to teach us how to get on that journey. Gosh, I felt so honored, you guys, to have Bernie on my show, and I really will feel forever changed. Just by my interview with him, I could truly feel his soul, and I can tell you it was a most beautiful experience. So before I go on any further, I want you to experience Bernie for yourself. So without any more delay, let's go talk to Bernie. But you guys know, first I got to tell you a little bit about him. Dr. Siegel, who prefers to be called Bernie, not Dr. Siegel, was born in Brooklyn, New York. He attended Colgate University and Cornell University Medical College. He holds membership in 2 scholastic honor societies, Phi Beta Kappa and Alpha Omega Alpha, and graduated with honors. His surgical training took place at Yale New Haven Hospital, West Haven Veterans Hospital, and the Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh. He retired from practice as an assistant clinical professor of surgery at Yale of General and Pediatric Surgery in 1989 to speak to sick patients about their caregivers. In 1978, he originated Exceptional Care Patients, a specific form of individual and group therapy utilizing patients' drawings, dreams, images, and feelings. ECAP is based on carefrontation, a safe, loving, therapeutic confrontation which facilitates personal lifestyle changes, personal empowerment, and healing of the individual's life. The physical, spiritual, and psychological benefits which followed led to his desire to make everyone aware of his or her healing potential. He realized exceptional behavior is what we're all capable of. Bernie and his beloved wife and partner in work, whom he lost last year, they lived in a suburb of New Haven, Connecticut, where he still lives today. They have 5 children and 8 grandchildren. Their home, with its many children, pets, and interests, resembled a cross between a family, art gallery, museum, zoo, and automobile repair shop. It still resembles these things, although the children are trying to improve its appearance in order to avoid embarrassment. Bernie has written many books. You can find them all on his website, berniesiegel.com, or in the show notes for this podcast interview on my website. His first book, Love, Medicine, and Miracles, was published in 1986. This event redirected his life. In 1989, Peace, Love, and Healing, and in 1993, his book, How to Live Between Office Visits, followed. Since then, he has written many more, such as Prescriptions for Life, 365 Prescriptions for the Soul, 101 Exercises for the Soul, and Love, Animals, and Healing, along with many more. His books always have the goal of humanizing medical education and medical care, as well as empowering patients and teaching survival behavior to enhance the immune system. Bernie has a realization that we all need help dealing with the difficulties of life, and his books offer this support. Woody Allen once said, "If I had one wish, it would be to be somebody else." Bernie's wish was to be a few inches taller, but his work has been such a growth experience that he's actually now a few inches taller. His prediction is that in the next decade, the role of consciousness, spirituality, non-local healing, body memory, and heart energy will all be explored as scientific subjects. For many, Bernie needs no introduction. He has touched the lives all over our planet. In 1978, he began talking about his patient empowerment and the choice to live fully and die in peace. As a physician who has cared for and counseled innumerable people whose mortality has been threatened by an illness, Bernie embraces a philosophy of living and dying that stands at the forefront of the medical ethics and spiritual issues of our society. He continues to assist in the breaking of new ground in the field of healing and personally struggling to live the message of kindness and love. Bernie has been named one of the top 20 spiritual influential living people on the planet by Watkins Review. He once said, "If you help people to live, wonderful things happen. And when people began living, miraculous things did begin to happen." All right, you guys, are you ready? You just need to sit back and enjoy this one. Put your laughing hat on and put your listening ears on, and let's go talk to Bernie Siegel. Okay, here we go. Hello, Bernie. I'm so happy to have you here today on my podcast because I've followed your work since the 80s, and I know that you're one of the first doctors ever to help people realize how to truly heal because you've helped them to live their life first. So welcome, and thank you so much for being on my show today.
Thank you. You know, you're saying that just reminds me when I go back 30 years to what I was doing and how much trouble I had getting anybody to support research or books or anything. And today, the books keep coming every day, you know, to ask me for a comment. about the same things we've talked about, and getting more scientific too.
Yeah, that's cool to finally realize that your work is not only, spreading its seeds like you've always wanted it to, but kind of catching on in the science
Right.
and the medical world.
Well, let me say it in two ways. I think that one is that people working with genes, they're not working with people. They're studying genes, but then
Yeah.
they begin to realize how these are affecting people's lives and how people's lives affect the genes, that it isn't the gene making the decision, but that's something, what's called epigenetics. It's like a light switch. You have to turn the switch on to get the light. And the same
Yeah.
is true with genes, that identical twin sisters don't get the same thing on the same day. But if you look at their personalities, you can know who's more likely to get a disease in terms of how they're living and everything else. So that was
Right.
one aspect. The other is that we treat people like objects, like mechanical objects. So if you have a problem, you go to the right repair person, as if it were your car. But what I realized, and when I had written an article and sent it to a medical journal about my experience, dreams, drawings, all kinds of interesting things that were facts, you know what I mean? Not me, just what I thought, but about
Yeah.
patient experiences. Yeah. And the article came back from the medical journal saying it's interesting, but it's not appropriate for our journal. So I thought, all right, I wanted to wake the world up, but what can I do? So I sent it to a psychiatry journal. It came back again.
Wow.
I was shocked
Yeah.
in a sense, because it said, yes, the article is appropriate, but it isn't interesting. We know all this.
Oh my
And
gosh.
that's the craziness, that the psychiatrists really were more likely to end up being my supporters, because when they were helping people with life-threatening illnesses, especially back when the AIDS epidemic came out, they saw that those who survived had a personality, what was called this, I call it a survivor personality, so that you could teach them how to be a survivor.
That's so cool. That is so awesome. I want to hear more about that, but I just want to tell you, my experience is coming, after I was 20 years a professional golfer and got sick from the pesticides and became really sick and had a bad back. And I had a near-death experience at the age of 11, and my bad back stemmed from that. But anyway, I then became a homeopath. And I don't know if you know much about homeopathy, but homeopathy treats the whole person. And many times
Right.
I got a very sick patient, let's say with lupus or even cancer, but usually in America they have to be seeing an oncologist, so we don't see them as their only avenue of treatment for cancer, at least unless the doctors give up on them. But so I've had a lot of patients that have a lot of what we can call incurable or difficult chronic diseases. And always, 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 my first question is, what happened right before your lupus, or what were the years like before? And many times when you treat that, let's say it's a grief, if a mother lost their child, or if they went through a horrible divorce or some kind of betrayal or something like that, you always see the story behind the story, don't you think?
Yes, but you see, you didn't hear this. First of all, yes, I use homeopathic physicians all the time and refer people to them. But see, what you didn't get into trouble with was from other doctors.
Right, I know. That's why one of my homeopathic teachers said, don't become a doctor or nurse, because then it's illegal.
But let me tell you, see, I would say to patients, what's going on in your life? And what did I hear from doctors? Why do you blame your patients? I said, what are you talking about? You ask them what happened in their life, as if it's their fault they got sick. I couldn't believe that that's their criticism. Say,
amazing. That's their response to you for asking them what's going on.
Yeah, two quotes. One from a poem called Miss G. A doctor comes home and he's sitting at dinner with his wife, and he says to him, W.H. Auden wrote the poem, "Cancer's a funny thing. Childless women get it, and men when they retire. It's as if there had to be an outlet for their foiled creative fire." A doctor yelled at me, just because it rhymes doesn't make it true. But see, all the therapists know it is true. It's like Monday morning. We have more heart attacks, strokes, suicides, and illnesses. And again, the Jungian therapists especially, back, before we had all these fancy cancer treatments, were helping people with cancer and saw how their life and their disease were intertwined. And Jung said this, which is a very powerful statement. He said, the diagnosis may help the doctor, but it doesn't help the patient. There, the key thing is the story, for it alone shows human background and human suffering, and only at that point can the doctor's therapy begin to operate. And that's
wow, that's a powerful statement.
Yeah, because a lot of people who expected to die in literally a few weeks or a month went home to just enjoy their last few days. And this is a true story. I don't make them up. And when I called up to ask why I wasn't invited to the funeral a year later, because I was upset with the family that nobody paid any attention to the fact that I wanted to come to this gentleman's funeral. He answered the phone, and he had moved to Colorado to be in the mountains when he died. He said, it was so beautiful here, I forgot to die. And, that's something.
Jeez, that's crazy, but that just shows you how much.
It's so true, yeah.
So there's a switch inside, and honestly, it sometimes can be a lot of work and years of work, because there are a lot of people who've had no love growing up and some very horrible conditions to grow up in, and then it's maybe more work to overcome. But sometimes it really is just like a simple switch to a different awareness.
Yeah, I think parenting, my statement is parenting is the #1 public health issue on the planet.
I agree.
A study was done of Harvard students. They were asked while attending college, did your parents love you? Those who said no, when they were looked up in middle age by the person doing the study, 98% had suffered a major illness. And those who said, yes, my parents loved me, 24% had.
Amazing. Not surprising, but that's incredible.
The advice I give people now is become a CD. If you said, what are you talking about? Young woman, suicidal, sitting in my office. I'm trying to get her to love herself, not commit suicide. She said, you're my CD. I said, what are you talking about? I'm a CD. You're my chosen dad.
Aww.
I would say that to anybody hearing this program. If you know somebody who's in pain, suffering, tell them you'll be their parent, chosen mom, chosen dad, and love them. Now, I always say, you don't have to like what they're doing, that if they're self-destructive, yeah, you can work on getting them to give up drugs, exercise, eat the right food, take care of themselves, whatever.
Right.
But they know you love them.
Well, it's interesting, Bernie, because my partner, Lloyd, we've been together, we just finished our 12th year, and that's how I got to know you and have you on my show, because of Dr. Hanscom. I know you're friends with him and do some lectures and things with him, and he works with a lot of chronic pain people. Well, Lloyd's one of those people. He had a neck fusion surgery 12 years ago and woke up with his feet hurting and numb, and since then never had it resolved, and very, very painful, and it's what I would call a chronic undiagnosed pain syndrome. They call it, of course, idiopathic neuropathy, which just means we don't know what's wrong with your feet. But anyways, that's how I got to know Dr. Hanscom. He's been a nice asset for my podcast, and we're working on some things. But Lloyd is a person who's had not a good childhood, neither parent loving, very kind of destructive, feeling abandoned.
Let me add something when you go home, because I learned this. I don't know what brought it to me, but it happened one day. What does your pain feel like? Now, there was a lady in the emergency room about to be admitted to the hospital because of her pain. And she wasn't my patient, but I went in to help her to relax and meditate because she was in so much pain. But I said, because of the meditation, I wanted to weave it in. What does the pain feel like? Oh, pressure. So I worked on relieving the pressure in your life and body, etc. And then I left her. 15 minutes later, the nurse found me and said, she's going home. It was her marriage. Her headache's gone.
Wow.
And I've seen this with other people.
Yeah.
You know, when you bring up what is it you're experiencing, the words that come out of them, I say, well, some of them immediately know. And they look at me and say, thank you, and walk out of the room because they know what they need to do at home.
Yeah.
And,
yeah. So if it's a sticking pain or a piercing pain, then you say, what is piercing in your life?
Right. Yeah, I say if it's a negative word, look at everything in your life that fits that word and eliminate it. I mean, I was having vertigo years ago, and one day I stood up out of bed and I thought, why don't you do what you tell people? What does it feel like? Well, the world is spinning around. And I realized that's right. You're doing too damn much. You need to take it easy. You ever think the vertigo puts you to bed and you get
yeah, right.
And you know, it's like when I lived the sermon, it was so helpful to me to do that.
Right. Sometimes doctors have the hardest time taking their own medicine.
Yeah.
But that's usually because you're too busy helping other people. It's not because you don't believe in it or want to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Tell your clients this. If they're looking for a doctor, go in and say, are you ever criticized by patients, family, and nurses? And the best ones all say yes, because they learn from those people. They learn from their mistakes. They don't make excuses. And so people keep talking to them.
Yeah, and the truth is my dad's he's 94 this week, and he's a retired doctor. He's an ophthalmologist, and he always taught me you have to listen to your patients, and so many doctors don't. That's the sad part. There's no time for them to listen the way our system is set up.
I know. Yeah, that's the sad part. I know some really nice doctors who their salaries have been capped because they're talking to their patients longer than the, you know, average time that the department spends, the other doctors spend.
Yeah, that was really, that's kind of my next question, what you think of modern medicine and the state of our medicine today.
Let me give you another story. All these things are true. A woman came into my office wanting surgery for something. She was complaining, it hurts, that hurts, I need you. And I looked at her record and it blew me away because every few months she was having surgery of some kind. And really significant stuff. And I realized what she was doing was driving doctors crazy. You know, like my back hurts, my knee hurts, I mean, my this hurts, my that hurts. And everybody would get so frustrated with her, they'd operate on her to get her to stop complaining, you know, even though they didn't know what was wrong. I mean, they didn't find anything physical, just her complaints. And I said to her, from looking at your record, I realized you're doing this to get attention and to be cared for by people. I'm not going to operate on you. If you want to come into the office, I'll help you to change and to heal, but I'm not going to operate on you. And she woke up, you know, and admitted it. And so she kept coming in frequently for psychotherapy. We'd sit and we would talk, and she got better and better. The months go by and I get a letter from her insurance company. We don't pay surgeons for talking.
Jeez.
So I wrote them a letter. I said, look at her record this year. Look at the first 6 months, how much money you spent on her, and look at the last 6 months, how little money you had to spend on her.
Right.
I said, because she is doing this to punish herself for many crazy reasons.
Yeah, and often we don't know that we're doing those things.
Yeah. But I got a letter back, which I got such a kick out of. It said, all right, keep talking.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, in my opinion, you know, I feel like medicine is so failing because at least in the area of chronic diseases, now I know in emergency medicine, they save lives and the surgery is amazing and stuff like that. But in chronic diseases, which is what's taking down our population right now with the rates of cancer and just autoimmune disease and all kinds of horrible environmental things that are going on. And so patient care is all about symptom management with drugs, and it's just so sad. And I'm curious, like, if you feel any hope that will ever change, or how do you feel about the current state of medicine?
Very disappointing to me, because I have written to drug companies, one ad in particular for antidepressants. It said, "I'm depressed, unable to cope. I went to see my physician. He prescribed this antidepressant," because it's an ad from the drug company. "I feel better now." I wrote to the drug company. I said, "Look, I'm depressed. Maybe somebody in my family has died." And I go to the doctor and I say, "I'm feeling depressed." And he says, "Here's a pill. Don't you think you ought to say, sit down, tell me what's happening in your life, why you're feeling this way," before he says, "Here's a pill"? So can you put a line in the ad that says, "Tell me what's going on in your life," before the doctor says, "Here's a pill"? And they refuse to answer the letter or change their ad.
Yeah.
But that's the sad part.
That is the sad part, because the truth is there's so much that can be resolved just with some kind of, caring, just with some kind of a bit of love and care to people. And I think that's why the rate of cancer is just going more and more, because there's a big lack of connection in people anymore. Maybe it's social media, I'm not sure exactly. I have my own ideas about stuff, but it just seems like people are getting further and further away from each other, not closer, not more compassionate.
Well, there's an interesting thing that I often say to people. It has to do with fiction. I say, if you want to know the truth, read fiction. And you'd say, what are you saying? Fiction writers, poets, songwriters, they see the world and they write about it. The fiction is they change the characters. You know what I mean? If they saw me doing something and thought that's an interesting story, I got to write about that. But I won't call him Bernie. I'll call him George. Then it's very different. And that's what I've learned, that read fiction and pay attention. And if you come across something, believe it. Now, in Solzhenitsyn's book, Cancer Ward, he uses the term self-induced healing. You never hear a doctor say, "Let me help, you to heal."
Right.
And they'll say, "Oh, you had a spontaneous remission. You had a miracle. Aren't you lucky?"
Right.
No, you got to say to the patient, "Why didn't you die when you were supposed to?" I mean, that may sound like a crazy question, but I began to ask people that I met who I thought were dead. Because they stopped coming back to the office. You assume they have died, but instead, they didn't see any reason to come back anymore.
Amazing. And what do you see in these people? Like, it's a two-sided question. What do you see in common? What traits do you see in common with people who get sick and cancer? And what do you see in common with the people who don't die when they're supposed to?
Well, from Alida Evans, a Jungiist, back in 1930, she said, "Cancer is growth gone wrong. A message should take a new road in your life." So I'd say that almost everybody who shows up with some chronic illness, it has to do with the feelings that they have not expressed. Or, well, I'll give you a quote. My mother's words were eating away at me and maybe gave me cancer. She told me I was a failure. I embarrassed her. She dressed me in dark clothes so nobody would notice me. Now, I met her wearing a red dress and other items that was so bizarre, I didn't know how her husband let her out of the house. I mean, she was sitting in the front row in front of me when I was lecturing, and I was getting a headache from her outfit.
Wow.
But when we were done, she handed me that letter that said about her mother. But at the end of the letter, it said, "You gave me permission to be my authentic self." And I went out and I bought red, high heel shoes and a red dress. And then I forgave her for what she was wearing.
Wow,
Because
it's
every
so
time
powerful, though, to think that
yeah,
somebody's story can trap them into for 40,
right.
50 years. I've heard it. I've had 65-year-old women sit in my office and they're still start bawling, crying when they're telling me the story of their mother, you know? And
And
it's,
I tell them, you don't need permission. See, her letter said, you gave me permission to be my authentic self. I said, why did you need me to give you permission? You know, but you feel so unloved. It's like somebody has to come along and say, no, I love you. You're wonderful. You know, you're my CD. And then they start to feel worthwhile and take care of themselves. But it's just so tragic. And let me mention this from Solzhenitsyn, because it's the key message. He said, self-induced healing flooded out of the great open book like a rainbow-colored butterfly. When I read that, I knew he knew all that I'm talking about. The butterfly is a symbol of change. You've got to struggle, the caterpillar, to break the cocoon and get free. And then you create a life that is in harmony and order, the rainbow. And literally, when people do drawings, every color has a meaning. It's no different than street lights. You know, why is red stop and green go? I mean, it's what they imply to people unconsciously, or purple is a spiritual color. I mean, it's just fascinating. And again, it's not taught to doctors. When
right, and I know you use a lot of this kind of drawing in therapy, and I want to hear more about it. But tell me what also now makes, so you're saying that the people who get sick, they didn't act on being their authentic self, and there's something they feel held back from or damaged from. And what
Right.
about the people who get well, the ones that survive? What do you see in common in those people?
Well, one psychiatrist came up with an immune competent personality working with AIDS patients. And basically what he was saying is you have a sense of meaning in your life. You do not feel afraid to say no when you're asked to do something you don't want to do. And nurses have a lot of trouble with that. But literally, if your friends or family said, I want you to help me, I need you to do something, and you can't or don't want to do it, you say no.
Right.
It's not the guilt. You also are capable of asking them for help and let them say yes or no. But you're not afraid to ask for help. You make decisions about your treatment. You know, it's not others imposing things upon you.
But that's
again,
how the medical world
right.
imposes on the patient when they say they don't want to do the chemo or the surgery. Right. Wow, I've seen my close people around me that have had this. The doctors go after them, even calling their house, yelling at their husband, putting pressure on the family. It's horrible.
And I can tell you, I know people who thought they were receiving chemotherapy and had their tumor shrink and had all kinds of side effects and radiation, and weren't having it because of medical errors, but they acted as if they were.
Wow.
And then some of my so-called crazy patients who were receiving treatment and had no side effects. So this radiation therapist called me. He said, I thought the machine was broken. Then I realized it's one of your crazy patients. And she said to him, yeah, I get out of the way and let it go to my tumor. See, that changed a lot of doctors where I'm working, because I always remember a woman who was told she'd be dead in a couple of months. Her relatives told her to come here to see me. And I asked this oncologist friend to come because she had leukemia, nothing surgical. And he said, Bernie, I agree with her doctor. She'll probably be dead in 2 months, but I know you and your crazy patients, so I'll give her hope. 2 months later, she was in complete remission without any sign of cancer.
Wow. So these people just have some kind of ability to change a way,
Yes.
the way they're living, but also their view on life, or do they take more compassion into their life? Do they become more positive?
They become good to themselves. Because it's like one woman said, I can't die, she had 9 kids, till they're all married and out of the house. And she died 20 years later when the last kid left home. See, my comment is, why don't you become the 10th kid? Be good to yourself, too. So I'd like everybody to think about being their own self and child. As I said, to get back to that list, you have play in your life, that you make decisions about your treatment. You're not, how can I say this? You're not doing things to not die. You're doing things to enjoy the quality of your life. So whether it's moving, taking your tie off, getting a pet, changing your diet, it's the things you want to do. To summarize it, I'd say love your life and love your body. And when you do those two things, then there's enormous change.
Yeah, and it's kind of like focusing on living instead of focusing on dying.
Right.
And when you're told you have cancer, I mean, the big C word, then the big fear comes in, and that's hard for people to overcome that, because we're just programmed that that's death. Cancer equals death.
Except for kids, I will tell people, don't fight a war and a battle. Think of how many headlines we read, well-known people die, so-and-so loses their battle. They didn't lose a battle. Why make them feel like a failure? What you need to do is work on healing, not fighting. I had one Quaker patient, a conscientious objector. His oncologist said, "Dave, I'm going to kill your cancer." So he thought he was telling him a wonderful thing. And Dave said, "I don't kill anything." And he walked out of the office. He didn't go home and die. See, now, if you looked at his drawings, you'd see his white blood cells carrying the cancer cells away. Not hurting them, just carrying them away.
Wow, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah. And he didn't go home and die. I mean, he did things more like what you're talking about, homeopathy and other nutritional things, and he lived for well over 10 years doing his thing.
And so about this art and the drawing, I'm curious, because I'd ask my kid patients, I'd always ask them to bring me their drawings, because you can tell so much about what people are drawing and painting. But my listeners don't know probably much about this. So as a medical doctor, and you've seen so many sick people, tell me, first of all, just how you got into that, and how do you use the drawings, and do they change? I'm sure they change when they get better, because I've seen it, but do you make any suggestions, or do you just let them draw and bring it to you?
Well, it's changing how they live, not fixing the drawing. See, I did a drawing for Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, God knows how many years ago, decades ago.
Wow.
And I drew an outdoor scene from a meditation. The first question to me was, why is 11 important? I said, I've been helping cancer patients for 11 months. Why'd you ask me? There are 11 trees in the drawing. What are you covering up? What are you talking about? Bernie, it's a white piece of paper. You used a white crayon to make snow on a mountain. You didn't need to add a layer. What are you covering up? And it was all my emotions and feelings as a doctor. I didn't know how to deal with all the pain and suffering that people were going through that I couldn't fix and cure. Because I like people.
Yeah.
And I was amazed at all the things she knew about me from this outdoor scene that I drew. And so I went back to the hospital with crayons. And I did a lot of children's surgery. So the kids don't have a problem. See, adults, I'm not an artist. But the kids would draw pictures, and you'd see so much about them and the future. And I could show it to the parents, too. Well, let me give you an example. I mean, one boy came in for type of plastic surgery to fix something. I said, draw yourself in the operating room. He takes a black crayon and makes like an insect on the operating table and a note, "I'm so tired, that's why the drawing is like this." I said to his parents, it's not about him being tired. That's his excuse. He knows this is not a good drawing. He doesn't have any self-esteem. I give him a box of crayons and all he picks up is black. I said, I'll fix the problem with his body, but he needs your love. He needs to feel love, not worry about how do I look. And you see, the parents know I'm not criticizing them. It's from their kids.
Yeah, right.
It's not saying it.
Right.
It's interpreting.
Exactly.
So if you draw yourself without hands, how are you going to get a grip on things? Oh, yeah, one boy, for instance, came in, and his legs were cut off at the bottom of the page. I said, what's going on? Why are you stuck? He said, turn the page over. I turned it over, and his legs were on the other page. Now, you see, here's a kid who doesn't fit on one page, and that's a kid who grew up with love. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he found a way to finish himself or to get another piece of paper.
Well, it's
But
interesting though, because I know my friend in Europe, her mom was having this horrible pain, and it was just a temporary thing. She hadn't lived years or months even with it, but it lasted for some weeks, and they put her in this kind of psychosomatic clinic, and they told her to draw and paint. And she went home, and her husband had died, I don't know, maybe a year and a half prior, and she was in mourning of that still, of course. But anyway, she started painting, and honestly, I'm not kidding you, and 6 months later, she's like one of the best artists ever. She's doing art shows, and it's incredible. And of course, her pain went away. And
yeah, I am an artist too, since I was a kid. It's part of why I became a surgeon. I wanted to use my hands. I didn't know artists earned a living. You know,
yeah, right.
I never would have been a doctor if I knew you could earn a living painting a picture and selling it.
Right.
But what I realized was, and I say this to people all the time, if you lose track of time, you can't age. Think about that. You're doing something that makes you lose total track of time. What's happening to your body then? See,
Yeah.
I had bad back pain, and I noticed something. I could stand for hours painting a portrait or in the operating room with no pain at all. And the first time it occurred to me was somebody calling our house, and I said, you know, my wife isn't here. She'll be back in a couple of hours. And then the phone rang again. It was the same person. I said, what the hell's wrong with you? I said, you're going to call me every 15 minutes? I said, he interrupted me. He said, Bernie, it's 2 hours since my last phone call.
Wow.
That blew my mind. And so my comment is, I only got 15 minutes older. I didn't get 2 hours older.
Yeah.
You know, because of your, so I found in the operating room and painting, pain was never an issue in my life because I was devoting myself to creating and helping others. And then you don't have pain because you're in a different state. Your body chemistry is totally different. Let me give you a simple example. A student told 2 actors to read a script for him. One script was the man murdered the woman's husband, and they meet, and the conflict that goes on. The second script was a comedy between the 2 of them, and he drew their blood while they were acting. And of course, what he found was that when you're in the comedy, your immune function increases, your stress hormone levels go down. And when you're in the tragedy, the stress hormone levels go up and the immune function goes down. So if you follow actors through the winter, you know, on Broadway or other big theaters, and you watch what happens to them, you'll find the ones in tragedies drop out during the winter for a week or 2 because it drains them and they get sick. Yeah. And I always say, if you're doing something with Mel Brooks, you don't quit. You're feeling good every night after night.
It's funny, all our sayings, you know, laughter is the best medicine. That's one of them. They're so true. Or like I've heard you say before when people say, people are a pain in the neck and then they have neck pain. Or I even tell that to Lloyd because he's easily irritated, but then he gets easily irritated by people. And I'm saying it's, you know, it's no surprise that your nerves are irritated. You know, you have to put the relationship together. But I think that might be a good start for Lloyd to start painting because he used to draw. His dad was an artist. And he used to paint and draw when he was little, and he hasn't done it in 30 years. I think he should start.
A stage in my life, you know, when I painted, when I was in pain. What was fascinating, I painted portraits. We have 5 kids. I painted my parents, all our kids, my wife, some of our pets. And then one day, I noticed everybody was running out of the house when I came home one evening. And I thought, what the hell's going on? And I realized they don't want to have to pose for you to be painted. Who wants to sit all night while you're painting? So I told all the pets and kids, I'll paint one of myself. And I put a mirror up. And I painted myself, which blew my mind today. as a surgeon with a cap, a mask, and a gown on. So you don't know it's me. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's how much pain I was in. When Elizabeth Kubler-Ross said, "What are you covering up?"
Uh-huh.
I mean, I needed therapy, obviously.
Well, and your time bringing this information out, it was such against the normal view, and still is. It still is. So I can only imagine that must have been a really difficult place, and maybe just drawing yourself as a surgeon was because that is where all the pain is. You're having to see all the sick people, and you feel sometimes helpless, and then you're not getting any support from your own colleagues. So that is a painful.
Well, that's why I learned to treat their experience, not just their diagnosis. But it helped me a lot to have a patient of mine one day say, "You're a nice guy. I feel better when I'm in the office with you, but I can't take you home with me. So I need to know how to live between office visits." That changed my life because I thought, wow, I don't have to be a failure. You know what I mean? I can't get people to live forever. But if I help them to live with their problems, then I'm doing something for them.
Yeah, and it just came down to you listened to that patient. You actually listened to her and you thought about it and you realized that you could do better work by helping them live.
Yeah, and then again, like the psychiatrist already knew, when you help people live, they don't die when they're supposed to.
Yeah, exactly. Time to take a little break and get a nice glass of juice or fresh distilled water. And remember, you guys, our bodies were not meant to get the minerals we need from rocks, which is known as inorganic minerals. We need to get the minerals from the plants that have processed those rock minerals from their soils and into then a more available form that our bodies can absorb. So it's important to drink pure distilled water and eat a high diet of raw foods. But if you need a good distiller, then you need to check out the one that I use, which is by My Pure Water. And the link is on my website under the products page, and they'll give you a little discount if you order from there. But also, if you think you do need to add minerals, then be sure to take only ionic minerals. And please don't take any other mineral supplements. My favorite ones are Good State Ionic Minerals because they do outside testing and it makes me feel confident what's in them and that they're the purest form possible. I know what's in the bottle when they have outside testing. And if you're interested in buying ionic minerals from Good State, then please use the link that's on my VidalSpeaks.com website. Lastly, I just want to say thank you to all of you out there that are using my Amazon banner. And for those of you that are new out there, I would love to ask you to choose the VidalSpeaks.com Amazon banner for all your Amazon purchases. It's a great way to support the show, and a little commission from many people can really help me with some of the expenses of the show. So thanks again, you guys. You know I appreciate every one of you. And if you want to further help the show, then you can contribute directly on my website, or you can become a Patreon at patreon.com/VidalSpeaks. And please share this podcast with all you can. I love you guys. Okay, now let's get back to the show.
One patient of mine was going to retire, just like in that poem, childless women get it, men when they retire. And I operated on him. He had cancer. I told him he needed more treatment. He said, no, it's springtime. He was a landscaper. I'm going to go home, make the world beautiful, so when I die, I leave a beautiful world. 6 years later, the nurse handed me his chart. And I said, he's dead. We must have two people with the same name. She said, open the door. I opened the door, and there sat John. I have a hernia from lifting boulders in my landscape business. He lived to 91. He quit when his wife died. Then it was okay if he went along with her. But he became my therapist. I mean that. I used to go for walks in the woods with him and see how beautiful the world was. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's sometimes we have to learn how to do that.
What I called the weed to John was a beautiful little flower.
Right. Bernie, this is one of the things that I think when I was saying to you about, the world just has so much negativity. There's violence, there's communication is all done by texting, and there's so many hardships. People are working 2 jobs. It's really hard for people to find joy these days and to find the beauty. So what do you tell them? What do you suggest? What's the first step to get people?
As I say, you have to love yourself in your life. I mean, not be a victim. If you don't like what you're doing, change. But the other is to be a love warrior. If you don't want to change, become a love warrior. What's a love warrior?
Mm-hmm.
If somebody's driving you crazy, you say, I love you.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
Let me give you simple examples. I pull into a parking space. A guy starts screaming at me that he's waiting for that space. It's his space. What am I doing? I lowered my car window and I said, I love you. And he drove away. A woman in our support group said, it doesn't work. I keep saying I love you to my alcoholic parents. Doesn't change them. She came in the meeting one day, all smiles. What happened, Mary? I was late for work the other day, and I ran out of the house, and my parents were in the street screaming, you forgot something. She said, what did I forget? I have everything. You didn't say I love you today. And she said, we were hugging and crying.
Aww.
And 3 months, they hadn't even answered her. But when she didn't say, I love you, yeah. And then there are violent people I have said this to. I mean, people who we felt were threatening us, in parking lots and different places where they were screaming. And I didn't know if this lady had a gun in her pocketbook, but I said to her, look, I want you to know I feel sorry for what's going on in your life for you. But I also want you to know I love you. She turned around, got in the car, and drove away. I had a screaming kid, cursing, yelling. I went to a cop. I said, tell him to stop. It's not my job. I couldn't believe a cop would say that. But I went to him with my family and kids worrying, he could kill you, he could shoot you, he may have a gun. What are you doing? But I went over to him and I said, I want you to know something. I'm sorry that your parents don't love you, but I want you to know I love you.
Aww.
He got in the car and drove away, complete silence.
Yeah.
And the feeling was, I hope he went home and talked to his parents about it. You
know?
know?
You never know. One sentence, one smile, one little deed that you do can change a person's whole life.
And when you internalize the feelings, that's when you hurt yourself. If you're being the good kid, making mommy and daddy happy, and never talking about how you feel, you're in trouble. Whereas if your twin sister's bellowing and loving and doing what she wants and not worrying what her parents say, yeah, she's less likely to come down with an illness than you are keeping everything inside.
Yeah, and sadly, a lot of parenting is about raising our children to be what we think they should be instead of nurturing who they are. And so kids are holding in because, a lot of them aren't. They're rebelling out and being violent, but many go the other way and they hold it in and never become who they truly are and don't even know who they are.
Well, let me give you the advice from my parents. 3 simple things which disturbed me as a kid, because I was looking for help. I'd come home from school, Mom, I have to make a decision. What should I do? Do what makes you happy. I'm looking for an answer, not do what makes you happy.
Yeah.
The other one was, Ma, I had a horrible day at school. Everything went wrong. God is redirecting you. Something good will come of this. Ma, I need your help. I used to talk to God in my bedroom. And my father had a very difficult life because his father had tuberculosis, no insurance, 6 kids,
wow.
and died when he was 12. But I never forget my father saying one of the best things that happened to me was my father dying when I was 12 years old. I said, how can you say that? You went through hell. He said, I know, but it taught me what was important about life. And he devoted his life to helping people.
Yeah, and I know you speak a lot about this, about how helping others is a big part of living a healthy life. Can you talk more about that?
Well, volunteers live a longer, healthier life, than people who don't ever volunteer to help anyone. You look at somebody like Mother Teresa. I love all the, I've got some of them. If I had them in front of me, I'd read them to you. I got so many papers piled around me. But it's her list of how to live, how to respond. And when you're there to give love to the world, it's a very different feeling. It's not about getting something. It's about giving something.
Yeah.
And how you feel when you help others. And that's something I've learned. I don't care if it's just holding a door open.
And do you think people today have lost a little bit of connection with gratitude and compassion?
Yeah, it's hard for people to look in your eye. I think a lot of people don't feel close anymore to anybody. I mean, to me, one of my statements is we're all the same color inside. Think about that.
Yeah.
Because I love saying, I have a picture of one of us, and you can't tell who it is. And there was a black minister at my house, and he had friends in the car. So we went out to the car, and I saw his friends. I said, I have a picture of one of us, and you don't know who it is. What's it a picture of? They looked at me like I'm nuts. He's black, you're white. How can we not know? But I knew my minister friend would teach them something. He pointed at his heart. And I said, yeah, see, I knew he would do that. Our hearts are the same.
So so if we've lost connection with, many of us feel that way. It's just the way the world feels like it's going, that people have lost connection with each other. So what can we do? Where do we start?
Each other. As an artist, I realized we're not black, white, yellow, orange. When you look at skin, it's every color. And I must say, I found black skin more interesting than white skin in terms of the other colors hidden in it and reflected by it. But it made me wake up as an artist, that you're not painting this person, you're seeing the person. And then you can do the portrait because you really see them. And we need to look at each other differently, not see what we have in our mind, but really see what's in front of us. And again, the key thing, quiet your mind. Only when your mind is quiet can you see the truth. The still pond. I often share the stories. The ugly duckling. See, he doesn't walk out of his house saying, my mother is a rotten woman, she's throwing me out, tells me I'm ugly. He walks off into the world. And what does he learn? He's a swan. Where? On a still pond. A tiger who's brought up by goats when his mother dies. Where does he learn he's really a tiger? Because he grows up as a goat. Another tiger sees him and says, hey, stupid, what's wrong with you? Come with me. Where does he take him? To the still pond. And then he sees he's a tiger. And those themes are over and over again. If you want to know what's really inside of you, quiet your mind. Now, whether you say yoga, meditation, or just sit and be still, but once your mind is quiet, you'll see the truth. And then you'll know what you need to do and who you are and everything else.
Yeah, because you talk a lot about, being in tune with your spiritual guidance, and we all have it. And maybe you can speak a little bit at that now, because I'm sure not only just people with cancer who have a lot of fear suddenly, but just in general, I think people need to know that everyone has spiritual guidance. And what can people do? Like, what's the best thing? Is it just to be quiet and try to connect to that spiritual guidance and start listening, and then you get better at it?
I will tell you a story. If you had to give me a new first name, what name would you give me? Would you call me?
Me give you a new first name?
Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
Anyway.
I'll have to think about that.
All right, think about it. But I drew a picture of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. It was a scene that came up in a meditation. And one of the things in the picture is a man who I met, because the meditation was about meeting an inner guide on a path. And so I meet him. We say hello. I was looking for Jesus or Moses or Abraham, somebody with a reputation. Because he tells me his name, and it's like, oy, what's that about? But anyway, a couple of years later, I was giving a lecture, and I realized I wasn't reading my notes. I wasn't doing what I planned to do. I was just standing there talking. And so I just kept it up because it was good. At the end of my lecture, the first person came up to me from the audience and said, "I've heard you before. That was better than usual." I said, "I agree." The next person said, "There was a man standing in front of you for the entire lecture, so I drew his picture for you."
Wow.
And it was my inner guide.
Interesting.
Then a little later, and it's interesting that it happened in the same building. It was run by nuns, Mercy Center, had a big auditorium. But I spoke at a funeral of a friend of ours, and Alga Worrell, the healer, was there. She knew him too. And we were standing in the hallway after the service, and she said, "Bernie, are you Jewish?" I said, "Why are you asking?" Because I spoke at a Christian funeral. She said, "No, there's a rabbi standing next to you." And she described my inner guide. See?
Wow. Yeah.
Every detail of his clothing. And that's when I finally realized why he was dressed the way he was. Because he was wearing a prayer cap and, everything. But not modern ones, like more from the 1800s, the way people dress. Because I have pictures of family and others, and I know why he's dressed the way he was. And also, he told me his name was George. And the reason I asked you to give me a name, in Stop and Shop one day, I was kidding around, which I always do, and a woman mentioned my name. I said, "Look, if I'm acting silly, don't call my name out loud. Give me another name." And she called me George in 2 seconds.
Oh, that's pretty funny. That's cool. That's very good.
I rely on George.
Yeah.
In this way, because God explained it to me. You're a satellite dish, a remote control, and a television screen. See, we have the option to find the right Lord. Like a satellite dish has many channels. So do we. Who's your Lord? Is your Lord money? Is your Lord a big house and car and people being impressed with you? Or is your Lord one who cares about other people and is here to make it a better world? And so you're given a remote control to pick a channel, and that's called your brain. You decide what you're going to tune into. And then the television screen is your body, because the screen doesn't make the program. It just displays it. And that's what our bodies are for.
Yeah.
We're here to, I always say, we're here to make God happy, to make the Creator happy by what we do.
So, I think these people, especially I think of a lot of the people that grow up with difficult childhoods and not much love, they would benefit so much by helping others, although they're the ones that usually, get lost in drugs because they're trying to escape but that was just their self-defense mechanism, which is self-destructive. But don't you think that a person that hasn't had a lot of unconditional love or good parents, that maybe by working on being compassionate, maybe doing a gratitude journal or every day telling them what they have or who they have in their life, or helping sick children or something to make them kind of turn the corner?
Well, what I've realized is everybody's wounded.
For sure.
But I'm always telling people, don't ask me, "How are you?" Say, "You're looking well today. Have a nice day." I mean it. I go around giving therapy to all these people in stores, cashiers. "How are you today?" I said, "Why are you asking that? Why are you bringing up all my problems?" And at the same time she said that, everybody in the store turned towards me like, "What's wrong with him?" And into the store came an employee who's been there for a long time, who knows me. So she walks over to me and says, "Oh, you're looking so well today." And the whole store busted out laughing, because I said, "See, I've trained her already."
That's pretty funny.
But the point is, let me give you this quote from Thornton Wilder. He wrote a story called The Pool at Bethesda. An angel stirs the water in this pool, and if you're there and go into the water, you're cured of your problems. And the doctor shows up one day and wants to head into the water. He's so happy the angel's there. But the angel says to him, not you, you back up. And he says, why me? Because I'm a doctor, you won't let me? He says, no, it's not because you're a doctor. But without your wound, where would your power be? It's your melancholy that makes your low voice tremble into the hearts of men. The very angels themselves cannot persuade the wretched and blundering children on earth as can one human being broken on the wheels of living. In love service, only the wounded soldier can serve. Draw back.
Yeah, so that's powerful, because it's kind of like the hard lessons come from that. You know, our greatest lessons come from the hardships.
Right. And all the people who keep saying to him, come into my house, our son only talks to you, you know, my wife only talks to you, and he realizes how true it is. And I say this to people because it really works. Put a bandage on over your eye, around your elbow. It doesn't matter, somewhere on your body that people can see. And watch how many people talk to you about their troubles and they've never told you about them before. I mean it, go to work with a bandage. When I shaved my head back in the 1970s, everybody in the hospital talked to me because they knew he screwed up. You know, everybody's wearing their hair down to their shoulders, even the boys then. And he goes and shaves his head. So what the hell's going on with him? But they all came to talk to me. They weren't afraid to.
Wow.
And I learned, you see, again, the inner image. I had to read more Jung to realize why I shaved my head. Years later, I'm reading, and he talks about this story in which the hero's head is shaved. And it's what monks do to uncover spirituality. And when I read that, I realized, one more thing I was covering up, see?
Wow, that's cool. That's a great analogy. Very neat.
Was my spiritual nature. Yeah.
Wow. So Bernie, you talk a lot about patients, that how you've asked over the years, you directly ask your patients if they want to live. I'm pretty sure they must be shocked when you ask that, because many of them must say, why do you think I'm here? But I know from being a homeopath that I really believe there are people who need their disease, that their disease serves them. So can you talk about this question you asked them and why that's important?
I can tell you that I have helped people die, not kill them. You know what I mean? I'm not a Jack Kevorkian. I've had people call me up and say they want to know how to reach Jack Kevorkian. I said, look, I love you. You're a child of God. And they're alive today. See, it's eliminating what's killing them, not killing yourself. So there are a lot of people who want to be dead just to get out of life. But I try to bring in that life. But when they get tired of life, then, okay, let's turn off the switch. You don't have to die in the middle of the night when the doctor isn't there, because doctors are good at not letting you die in the hospital. And that's why most people in the hospital die in the middle of the night. So in my family, and I mean this literally, parents, in-laws, wife have died, but they had no trouble dying. See, it's not a failure. My father died looking so healthy, laughing at stories my mother was telling, surrounded by loved ones. I thought he was going to change his mind. I mean, he said he died Sunday, so everybody came, and my mother told stories about their early, dates and different things, and he was so happy and listen. And he was in a coma, but you hear even in a coma. But he looked so healthy after a while. I thought he's going to open his eyes and say, I'm not going to die today. This is fun. Let's try again tomorrow. But when the last person, again, how does he know this? The last person who said, I'm coming to see Grandpa before he dies, walked into the room, he took his last breath and died.
That's cool. That's cool to know we can die kind of then when we want to.
Yeah. But he knows intuitively this is the last person, our consciousness. I've had near-death experience. You mentioned you had. I had when I was 4 years old, choking on a toy. And I realized I'm not my body. When I would tell this story, I'd say to people, the kid on the bed. And I thought, why do you say the kid on the bed? Why don't you say it was you? And I knew it's not me.
Yeah.
Because I'm, out of my body, seeing, thinking, and I just found it fascinating after a while when I began to hear what I was saying, that our essence is not our body. As I say, it's like the television set, that it's there to let you do things, but that's not you.
Yeah,
And we do.
and I think the hard part,
I want people to know it's not them living more than once. It's their consciousness. So each of us, whether we're aware of it or not, is impregnated with the consciousness of those who have lived before us. So when the 5-year-old plays a violin in a concert orchestra, it isn't that somebody trained the 5-year-old. It's that there is a concert violinist in him, that consciousness. So he has skills and ability that another 5-year-old won't have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think, though, when you're talking about, just this whole idea about people, we have this certain, I don't know, I want to say, like, some people just needed their disease or their symptoms. And I even asked one patient, like, what would your life be like if you didn't have your symptoms? And she went, wow, like, I don't even know how to think of that. It's almost as if it was such a convenience for her, because it actually gave her something. But she, of course, would never tell you that. All she could tell you is how much she wanted to get rid of it.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of important signs. I called it Siegel sign. Family comes into your office, one person looks well, and 5 of them look sick. Who's got the disease? The one who looks well. And I mean this, it's really happened. And you'd say, well, why is that? Because they're driving the family crazy, making them take care of her. And see, so for some people, if you said to them, I'm going to make you well, they don't come back. They don't want to be well. They may not want to hurt as much as they are, but they don't want to get cured, because then nobody will pay attention to them. So it's to help people realize you don't need to have something wrong to get attention. You can say, I need a hug, I need your love or whatever, but don't need a disease to get one.
Yeah, and this is what I was saying, especially in cases like with my Lloyd, or my friend's son who has a chronic pain syndrome, and he's only in his young 20s. And there's so many millions around the world, as Dr. Hanscom works with, that are in a lot of what I would call they're not life-threatening things. They're not going to die from it. It's not cancer, but they have these horrible lives because they're living every day with pain. And I always would say this to Lloyd, just know that you can always say you don't want to go somewhere, but don't ever tell me you don't want to go because your feet hurt. Because I just don't want that to be the reason that you're not going. I don't want to give it any power, I just want you can not want to do something, no problem. And I understand he has limitations of things he can do because of the pain. That's the sad part. But these are the kind of people I think of more, because it's not a life-threatening thing like cancer where it's so acute and you want to live or don't want to live. But maybe, I don't know, with these kind of patients, it's an interesting question that you ask people, do you want to live? Because I often wonder why so many people in the world have these pain syndromes, and what is the emotion behind it? Are they trapped? Are they irritated? What is it? But there's got to be something that's in common, because so many people have pain syndromes now.
Yes. So, when you have that peace of mind, and know you're here for a reason, and give love, a lot of wonderful things happen.
Yeah, and I think Dr. Hanscom's work has really helped Lloyd, because I think it points out when you're one of those people and you start feeling like a victim, because then you start feeling trapped from the pain, and then you can't do this, and then you're angry. And Dr. Hanscom always says, just live your life, Lloyd, like as if you don't have your pain. Just live your life. And that's been a really good thing, and that's what we're working on now, is more just getting through the emotions of just really working on being happy and looking out the window and seeing all the positive things and not the negative things. Just changing the way you have looked at the world, because it's not working.
Yeah, you need to understand you're a unit. You're not separate parts. Mind and body work together, and you need to understand that. And there are a lot of people who don't want to understand it. They want to blame things. You know, find the cause. You know, it's got to be something wrong. Look at my x-ray, look at my blood test, look at my genes. But as I said, back where we started, to the epigenetics, your genes need somebody to turn them on and off. So when you find love and peace and happiness, I always say, read about Helen Keller and all the things she's written. You know, blind and deaf from the time she's 3 or 4 years old. But she's just so filled with love and beauty. You feel good reading about her. She's not complaining. There are people who feel, because of their religions, that God is punishing them. Mm-hmm. That's why they're sick and why they're in pain and everything else. God is punishing them. And there are others who realize, no, you've lost your health. God is going to help you find it again.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Punishing.
It's like a different viewpoint for sure. So the bottom line, I guess, is I'm curious, how much of healing do you think is due to our emotional state versus our physical body, mechanical state?
All of it.
Yeah.
I mean, I say to people, I can't stop you from dying someday, but I can have you live a healed life and live your fullest life.
Yeah.
Here's something from 1,000 years ago, Maimonides, 2 sentences. One is that disease is a loss of health, and we're to help people find what they've lost. And the other was, if people took as good care of themselves as they do their animals, they'd suffer fewer illnesses.
For sure.
If you read the pet magazines, you will find that there are people who smoke outdoors to protect their pets. This is a quote from Cat Fancy magazine. Doug and I now smoke in the yard. We're not killing our cats anymore. We hope you're not killing yours.
That's great. I know you love animals. I love that about you.
More than the convenience of smoking indoors. Now, how the magazine could publish that without a comment was beyond me. But why not love yourself as much as your cats?
For sure. And Bernie, I know you wrote a book, Love Animals and Miracles, is it?
Miracles.
Yeah. And I know how much you love animals, and that's such a great addition to all your wealth of books. And I love all your work. It's so beautiful, and I'm curious what you're working on these days.
A lot of spiritual things. I hope to have another book out within a year with Hay House, because I found things in my papers from years ago. Letters from ministers, things I had written, and just sharing all the spiritual wisdom and knowledge, because it's all, as I say, the common themes to help people heal and to know what life is truly about.
And how would you describe spirituality?
Well, that in a sense, we're all immortal. I mean, what doesn't die is our consciousness. What dies is our body. So we're all here to use our bodies to do something good for the world, as I say, to make God happy, to help creation. The life isn't unfair, it's difficult. And what we need to do is face the difficulties and help each other and learn. And the more you learn, the less difficult it gets.
And so do you think spirituality is as important also as emotional health?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they go together.
We could go on for another hour. I have other things I have to do. But it's, again, I read Jung a lot, and others, Science of Mind, Jung, I mean, all kinds of things that I read. But synchronicity, in other words, our consciousness really creates our future. Mm-hmm. So it's not a coincidence where you end up at a certain time. Sometimes it can be a great benefit, and other times it can be a disaster. But you're putting yourself in that place because of your consciousness and the decisions you're making. So when you're making what I would call the right decisions that are life-enhancing, you'd be amazed at the wonderful things that can happen and who you meet.
Great. I love it. So let's end it by you telling the listeners your website and how they can follow your work. I know you have some videos on YouTube, and then maybe you can just leave 3 little tips for them to be happier.
The website is Bernie Siegel, MD, BernieSiegelMD.com. And there are all kinds of, stories, articles, everything. One that I love, Deceiving People into Health, which shows how powerful your mind is. That I could lie to you, tell you I'm giving you a wonderful treatment, and you get better, and I was a lie. But I got your mind and body to believe and to accomplish it. So those are things I learned, especially from doing a lot of children's surgery, that the kids had faith in me and their parents. So we knew we could tell them things and good results would happen because they believed in us. And I'd say believe in your power. It's not about being a failure. That's what a lot of people, I realized, are living with because of how they were brought up. I want you to draw a picture. I'm not an artist. I have my son do this for me. I want you to read a book. I don't have the time to read a book. And then there are people who sit up all night reading the book and drawing a picture and show up the next morning. See, that's a survivor. So learn from survivors. It's not good luck. It's good behavior. And again, to not think of death as a failure. It's going to happen to everybody. It's about enjoying life. And then the byproduct is you end up living longer. So it's okay to laugh for no reason, not be angry at God and everybody else, but to live. And I'd say when you get up in the morning, be grateful. Know that you have power to change your mind. And to read. It's almost like saying read fairy tales and poems, and because again, the stories will tell you the truth that that person who's written it has seen. So there are times I read a poem or I listen to a song and it's like, oh boy, I believe that now. I mean, let me just give an example. In the show Carousel, a man dies in a robbery. He's shot. And the angel's showing him around, says, hey, your daughter's going to graduate from school. You want to see her graduate? He said, my daughter's a baby. What are you talking about? And when he died, she was a baby. And the angel says, there's no time up here. What a powerful sentence, see?
Yeah.
When you leave your baby, there is no time. So then I understood a lot of stories from parents, how their children showed up years later. And I would say, well, then your kid's a bum. Why isn't he doing something? What's he hanging around for? But the stories are amazing. If I start, I'll go on for an hour.
I know, you're one of the best storytellers ever.
And as I say, my wife died last January, and she's been with me ever since. And we were married on the 11th, and I'll say a quick one. I have found a dime and a penny 5 times in the ensuing months in places where you'd never expect to find a dime and a penny. It made no sense.
That's so cool. My mom leaves me pennies, and I know that's my thing. It's so awesome.
All these signs, look for pennies from heaven. If you find a lot of pennies, you're on the right path.
Yeah, that's so cool. I know. Heads up, brand new, shiny. Say thank you, Phyllis. All right, cool. Thank you so much, Bernie. That was awesome. And I'm so happy you said yes to be on my show because you've spread your seeds of wisdom and spirituality and health and taught so many people how to live life. And I'm proud that I can have you on my show.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. And we'll talk soon. See you later, Bernie. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Well, you guys, I hope maybe you know now why this was truly one of my favorite interviews. What a happy, caring soul Bernie is, right? I just love him, and I want to say thank you, Bernie, for all you've done in the world to help others. And thank you for being strong, even when your own profession mocks your work and tried to bring you down. Thank you for staying committed to your patients and not to the politics of medicine. Thank you for all you've taught me, because I read your first book back in the late 70s and it touched my life back then. So thank you just for being you. You truly are a healing angel on this planet. I hope you guys loved his stories as much as I did. And I hope that any one of you out there that are struggling with some kind of diagnosis can realize that you are not your disease. that you're a person that's full of love and you have so much to offer out into the world. I know it's hard to believe that at times, but it's people like Bernie that you can count on to keep telling you that message and to make you laugh and find the life that you've always dreamed about. So on that note, I'll close by asking you, what can you do today to make your life happier? What can you do to inch closer to living the life that you dream of? And don't forget that helping others is often a choice that brings so much joy back to you. So if you're not sure where to start, then start by reaching out to help others in any way you can. Well, you guys, I hope you enjoyed the show today. I have loved being with you, as always, my podcast family. But you know what time it is, right? Yep, it's time to say goodbye. So until next time, look for joy at least every minute of the day, and you'll find it, I promise. Most people are seeing the violence or the bad things, but try to focus on finding love and finding joy, and just watch what happens. Till next time, ta-ta for now. Vidal has spoken. Remember, you heal with a high raw plant-powered diet, homeopathy, and detoxing, of course. Peace, be healthy, be free, live life.